Inheriting Dad's house, losing Mom's love, how I uncovered her true motive and built a life beyond the betrayal. When Dad passed away and left me his house, Mom left me. I overheard her telling her husband that she was only doing it to get money from her parents, but she later made an effort to set things right. Just a few months before my 18th birthday, at the age of 17, my life took an unexpected and excruciating turn. My father died. He experienced a heart attack. He was there with us, vibrant, 1 minute, and then he was gone. The speed at which everything changed is still difficult for me to comprehend. No warnings were given, no time to prepare ourselves emotionally or say our goodbyes. The most important person in my life, my dad, was abruptly taken from me. We had a very strong connection. I looked to him for guidance, solace, and amusement. It was like losing a piece of my soul when I lost him. My dad's lawyer brought the family together to make his will public after his funeral, while we were still in the cloud of mourning. Although my dad wasn't particularly affluent, he had worked hard throughout his life and had made wise investments. The lawyer revealed, much to everyone's surprise, that he had essentially left everything to me. He owned the family home, but it was now in my name. I had the deeds to the house signed by him. I didn't first completely understand the significance of that, especially when I was still grieving his passing. My mother was enraged while I was still absorbing it. She began screaming as soon as she learned that the house was now legally mine, and she adamantly asked that the lawyer show her the will so she could confirm it. To put things in perspective, my parents' marriage was among the worst in history. My parents were always at odds, and it wasn't like one of them was at fault because they were both flawed. They had first married for love, or at least that was how they explained it, but any love they had had soon vanished. As their disagreements widened, their love gave way to frustration and resentment. My parents were both very focused on their careers. That really made them farther distant from one another, despite your assumption that it would bring them closer together. My dad's achievement was too much for my mom to handle. This was because she lost out on years of her work when she decided to have a child. My dad never made her make this decision, to be clear. My mother has expressed to me on multiple occasions her uncertainty about having children. She ultimately made the decision to become pregnant nevertheless since she didn't want to look back and regret not having children. But she soon discovered how much she detested it after having me. My mother is a prime illustration of why not every adult should be permitted to have children. She would become upset with me for the tiniest things, like not tying my shoes properly or having trouble with my homework, and I can still clearly remember those times. From the beginning, she treated me like a burden. Even if I couldn't really comprehend it as a child, I could sense her contempt. I would witness other children with their mothers receiving warmth, support, and hugs. She only gave me coldness and criticism. My mother treated me badly because she was frustrated with her own life. I couldn't help but feel like I was in the way. Due to health problems and pregnancy complications, my mom had to take a few years off from her job after giving birth to me. She blamed me for her inability to work, which she detested. My dad was the one providing for the family at this period. He believed that this would be the ideal chance for my mother to connect with me, but it never did. My mother chose to remain emotionally aloof throughout this time rather than attempting to connect with me. She would frequently tell my dad and I that she wished I had never been born because she wasn't suited to be a mother. As a result, my dad would threaten to divorce her throughout a number of arguments with her. My mother would threaten to take me away from him as a form of punishment for him abandoning her, rather than taking her to see a psychiatrist. My mother was obviously unhappy with the way things had gone, both in her marriage and as a mother. My mom frequently left me alone without any concern or attention by zoning out for hours, watching TV at home, or going out with her friends. She made no attempt to hire a babysitter. I was left to my own devices most of the time. During her few visits, she made it apparent that she had no interest in taking on the duties of a typical mother. I don't recall her ever preparing a decent meal for me because she detested cooking. Pizza rolls, mac and cheese, and other frozen foods that didn't require work made up the majority of my diet. That was all I knew for a long time. Since I was too little to understand any better, I didn't mind at the time, but now I see how neglected I was. It was more than just missing home-cooked meals or a good hug. The most painful part was the emotional abandonment. I immediately discovered that I should never complain to my mother about anything. Every time I attempted to communicate my wants or sentiments, it would backfire. She would reprimand me and act as though I was solely to blame, never accepting responsibility or making an effort to make things right. I found it easier to suppress my emotions and keep her from getting upset. I was always trying to avoid upsetting her, always trying to blend in, and always walking on eggshells. I was deeply scarred by the reality I had to live with. Unlike my mother, I felt appreciated and seen by my father. He was undoubtedly the best of the two, but I wouldn't say he was the ideal parent. He had his shortcomings too. He really liked hanging out with me, unlike my mom. He never gave me the impression that he was acting out of duty. It made all the difference because he truly cared about being in my life. As I began to mature, our home underwent a transformation. In the end, my mother returned to work, although she never fully reclaimed the esteemed position she had held before to her leave. She detested having to rebuild her career after feeling that she had already paid her dues and had to start over. It wasn't any easier to be the target of her hatred, even though I could somewhat understand her frustration, losing years of professional advancement and feeling stuck in her situation. I ended myself spending a lot of time alone myself after my mom started working again. I would get home from school, prepare a basic lunch, and complete my assignments. It became a habit, and to be honest, by then I was accustomed to getting by on my own. I had essentially come to realize that I couldn't count on my mother to provide me with much emotional or physical support. My parents still tried, though. My dad and I would go out to supper together on some evenings. My mother never came. As though she were an outsider in her own family, she maintained a distance from them. My dad and I would discuss everything at those dinners. I would tell him everything about my school life, my friends, or whatever was on my mind, and he would tell me about his job, occasionally the fascinating projects he was working on, or office drama. Everything seemed regular during those few hours. It was one of the few times I didn't feel like an afterthought or a burden, but rather like a daughter enjoying time with her father. I truly treasure those times because they made me feel safe and connected. My mom started a new job that needed her to travel frequently when I turned 14. I believe she saw the high-paying job as an opportunity to finally regain some of the professional success she had lost. She chose to take the job without consulting my dad, which resulted in one of the most heated arguments I've ever seen between them. Although my dad didn't mind her working, she would be gone for days at a time for this job, which meant he would have to care for me by himself. Their voices reverberated throughout the home as I listened to them quarrel late into the night. I was the primary point of disagreement. I detested that. I detested being the cause of so many of their arguments. I went to my dad's study later and assured him that I could take care of myself while he was at work and that he didn't have to worry about me. I reasoned that perhaps my parents' relationship would improve if I could only demonstrate that I wasn't a burden. I recall the expression on his face when I said that. Guilt swept over him. As though he recognized that I had been made to mature more quickly than I should have, he drew me into an embrace. It was one of those times when we both recognized the true dysfunction of the situation without explicitly stating it. My mom started her new job shortly after, and she started to go missing for days at a time. The home was quieter, almost tranquil, without her. It wasn't much better when she returned either. When she did spoke to me, it was like she was speaking to a complete stranger. Warmth and a sense of belonging were lacking. She would return home fatigued, give me a fleeting glance, and then either go back out with her friends or go into her room. Despite the fact that we were in the same room, she felt very far away. I had learned not to expect much from her by then, but it still hurt. My parents' marriage was essentially non-existent by the time I was 16. As though they were just housemates, they were sleeping in separate bedrooms. If you're wondering why they didn't simply file for divorce and move on, trust me. I asked myself that question often. In actuality, I believe that they both chose not to get a divorce because it was simpler to continue living in this unhealthy, distant relationship than to deal with the financial and legal complexities of separation. When it comes to alimony, legal bills, and arguing over child custody, things that neither of them seem to want to deal with, divorces may be extremely expensive. My schooling was the only significant investment that my parents truly shared, despite the fact that they both made good money. They hardly spent any money on me other than that. Other than the home expenditures, they didn't have much money to divide because my dad owned the house. They didn't have to quarrel over little matters. They lived under the same roof, but had largely independent lives, each with their own food and car. For my part, I would receive money from my dad each week, which would be plenty to pay for groceries and school lunches. I didn't really anticipate much more, and while it wasn't much, it was sufficient for me to handle. I had gotten used to being in the background while they were preoccupied with their own problems and grievances. As I approached my 17th birthday, I made the decision to celebrate my birthday in a way that was authentic for once. My birthday had always been somewhat of a non-event until that point. Unless I reminded him, my dad, bless him, had a tendency to forget my birthday. He would try his best to get me a cake once I did, and we would either have a low-key dinner or celebrate in private at home. However, it was never more than the two of us. I wanted something bigger this time. I wanted to have a true party and invite my friends over. To my surprise, my father concurred. He helped me organize it and thought it was a terrific idea. Naturally, my mother declined to go. She simply stated that she didn't want to be part, without even bothering to offer an explanation. I honestly didn't give a damn. I had been emotionally and physically accustomed to her absence by that time, so I wasn't bothered by the idea that she wouldn't be present. I finally received what I wanted for the first time in my life, a birthday celebration filled with joy, laughing, and friends. It was ideal for me, but it wasn't ostentatious. For a second, I was truly joyful. I had finally come to terms with the fact that my life was what it was, flaws and all. However, that fleeting moment of happiness was quickly eclipsed by tragedy, as if the universe couldn't bear to see me pleased. It seemed unreal when my dad died. My mother still detested me, and here I was, only 17, inheriting the home we shared. She made it obvious how much she detested me since she couldn't accept that my dad had given me the house. After the will reading was finished, she yelled at me for hours, claiming that I had manipulated my dad throughout the years and that she was the true owner. Then she modified her strategy. She began attempting to persuade me to put her name on the house's deed. Fortunately, my dad's parents, my grandparents, defended me. They ensured that I couldn't be influenced by my mother. Since she was never a decent wife to my dad when he was living, they made it apparent to her that she didn't deserve his house simply because he was dead. If she attempted to compel me to alter the deed, they even threatened to take her to court. My mother became enraged and threatened to leave me. She claimed that because I was self-centered enough to refuse her the house, she intended to prove to me that I couldn't live without her. She seemed to be trying to convince me that I couldn't support myself, as if losing her would also make me realize how much I depended on her. My paternal grandparents refused to give up. They promised to take care of me in the event that my mother left. In contrast to her, they promised to support me through anything, not only until I was 18, but for the rest of my life. My mom followed through on her threat and left within 2 or 3 weeks after my dad's death. My dad had loved and collected comic books for years, but my mom threw out his whole collection before she left the house. It was her last act of retaliation. It is obvious that she did it out of spite, in some perverse manner, to harm me, to destroy him, and to hold me accountable for any resentment she may have had inside. When I was nothing, she said, I would come crawling back to her in a few years. At a time when I was already feeling totally lost, her words were poisonous and intended to tear me apart even more. She left me as though I had no significance to her. It was hard for me to comprehend that she could leave so simply, so soon after my father's passing. I felt as though I had lost both of my parents in a matter of weeks, and the burden was unbearable. As promised, my paternal grandparents moved in with me. They made every effort to give me support and stability during this period. My grandparents were calm, loving people who understood how much I was in pain. They set aside their own suffering to support me, despite the fact that they were also hurting. I was simply trying to get by day in the meanwhile. My mom's desertion made me feel even more alone, and I was already grieving over the loss of my father. I was unable to completely comprehend what was going on around me, as if I were living in a fog. I made myself get out of bed, get dressed, and go to school every day. I knew I needed to complete my education in order to be someone in my life, even though I wanted to shut down entirely when I was still in high school. I couldn't get my mother's words out of my head. Without her, I would be nothing. I vowed to myself that I would work hard and make sure I succeeded for the rest of my life. My maternal grandparents also made it a point to see me often during this very trying period in my life. They were incensed that their daughter had left me after my dad's death and were just as astonished and horrified by my mom's behavior as I was. They actually bore a great deal of responsibility for it. I've put a lot of effort into creating a life for myself over the last 5 years. I persevered through it all, graduating from college last year with honors, cum laude, and landing a fantastic career in information technology. Being able to work remotely has made the position an incredible opportunity. Given everything I've been through, this flexibility has allowed me to travel the world while still working, which feels like a dream come true. I never imagined that I would be here, leading a life that seemed so full of possibilities. But I managed to get through those difficult times somehow. The house my dad left me has been a blessing in more ways than I can list, and I still reside there. I was able to save a substantial sum of money that I would have otherwise spent on rent in addition to having stability during my time in college. I was able to graduate from college debt-free thanks to the money my father gave me and some assistance from my paternal grandparents. Since starting my career, I've been gradually making the house more uniquely mine by remodeling each room. Every improvement I make to the house makes me feel as like I'm taking back and personalizing the space that has so many memories, both happy and sad. Even though they have now returned to their own house, my paternal grandparents still frequently visit me. We still have a close relationship, and I try to see them as much as I can. They were there for me when I needed them most, and for that I will always be thankful. In all these years, my mother had never once gotten in touch with me. I did get tidbits of information from cousins on her side of the family, and based on what I've heard, she has never felt bad about leaving me. Additionally, rumors told me that she remarried and is currently leading an opulent life with her new spouse. She finally got what she had always desired, I guess, a life without obligations and according to her own rules. My mother unexpectedly contacted me last week for the first time in 5 years. She began by sending an email. She most likely obtained my email address from someone else or from my LinkedIn profile. She mentioned in the email that she had missed connecting with me over the years and that she wanted to communicate. I felt nothing when I read her name in my email. No sadness, no desire, no rage. I definitely would have been desperate for her attention, clamoring for her approval and seizing the opportunity to get back in touch if this had occurred 5 years prior. I would have done anything to win her love back then. Now, though, it was like reading a stranger's email. I was not moved by anything she said. I decided not to respond since, if nothing else, I was annoyed by her message. Then she started phoning me all the time. She may have gotten my number from one of my cousins, but I'm not sure how. I received multiple voicemails from her. She expressed in each one how much she would want to meet and get back in touch. I disregarded each and every one. I didn't need her to pull me back to that dark place after years of mending and moving on my own. Then she texted me for a long time last week. This one was unique. She expressed her sincere guilt for what she had done and her want to simply meet and offer her apology. She said she wanted to make amends with me after giving it some serious thought over the last few years. If I claimed that after reading that message, I wasn't a little intrigued, I would be lying. She had never taken responsibility for her acts before, but now she appeared to be doing so for the first time. I wondered what had led to this abrupt change of heart, but I wasn't prepared to forgive her. Was she truly sorry? Was she serious? Or was this just another self-serving ruse to make herself feel less guilty? I answered when she called again. I wanted to know what she truly wanted because her insistence was beginning to irritate me. After responding, I asked her directly what she wanted from me. I instructed my mother to talk rapidly and made it plain that I would block her and finish the conversation within the next 5 minutes if she didn't have anything important to say. She frantically begged me not to interrupt her right away. She said, "I missed you, and now that I'm older, I hate myself for everything I did." Her voice trembled. She repeatedly apologized, telling me that she had finally come to the realization of the seriousness of her acts, and I could hear the desperation in her voice. She continued by saying that while it was clear that she understood if I didn't want a relationship with her, her true desire was simply to meet with me. I wanted to explain why I did what I did all those years ago, she stated. As though there were some rationale for leaving me out of the question. I couldn't resist laughing. She had given me enough justifications to last a lifetime. I informed her that I didn't need any closure from her because I had already come to terms with the situation as it was. I didn't care, so I didn't need to know why she did it. However, she insisted that I at least join her for supper. She assured me that she would never disturb me again if I didn't agree with her and that I could block her or go. She was so desperate it was almost disturbing. I wasn't comfortable with it. There was a strange feeling. Why now? Why was she now so keen to make amends after being silent for 5 years? Now, the same woman who had cursed me and said I would be nothing had reappeared, pleading for one opportunity to give an explanation. I couldn't get rid of the thought that this abrupt change of heart was about something else. Everything looked too premeditated, too abrupt, as though she had a secret agenda. I smelled something fishy, but I couldn't identify it. I chose to comply even though it was against my better judgment. I simply wanted to find out the true purpose of this. I reluctantly consented to join her and her new spouse for supper. The meal was held at my mother's new home, and I could tell right once that she was leading a very different life. The home was extremely opulent, with pricey artwork, sumptuous furniture, and sophisticated accents all over. Bill, her new spouse, appeared sufficiently amiable and kind. We engaged in small talk after his kind introduction, but the entire situation felt uneasy, as if there were enormous unsaid tensions between us. As I walked past the bedrooms during dinner to use the restroom, I couldn't help but notice them. They seemed like they were from a luxury catalog because of how exquisitely designed they were. The pictures that lined the walls attracted my attention even more. Images of my mother and Bill grinning together while visiting far-flung places across the globe. They appeared content and relaxed. I was saddened to see that. She never acted that way toward my dad and me. Her smile with us was unlike anything I had ever seen. I was taken aback by the contrast, which evoked emotions I had previously suppressed. I heard Bill and my mother conversing in low tones as I was making my way back from the restroom. Since they hadn't noticed me approaching, I stopped and tried to listen to what they had to say out of curiosity. My mother was telling Bill how much she detested seeing me and how much I reminded her of my father at that point. I felt sick to my stomach. Despite Bill's attempts to comfort her, she persisted in moaning that she wished she could skip the entire supper. I took out my phone on a whim and began to record. I have no idea why, although it might have been a reflex, as if I needed evidence of her true vileness. Perhaps I hoped to see it later so I could completely comprehend what was going on. In any case, I made a record. I overheard my mother tell Bill that she would never have gotten in touch with me if it weren't for her folks' insistence that she get back in touch. She continued by saying that she detested her parents for pressuring her to take this action and that, as a result of their circumstances, she was merely going through the motions to ensure her inheritance from them. Everything made sense when she said those words and explained that this dinner and the entire act were really a means to an end for her. Now everything made clear. My mother hadn't become morally upright overnight. She hadn't given it much thought, and she most definitely didn't feel bad about leaving me. All along, my intuition had been correct. For a minute, I stood motionless, my heart pounding. Her statement that she didn't want to be doing this and that she detested being around me struck a deeper chord than I had anticipated, even though I had a sneaking suspicion something wasn't right. She remained the same self-centered individual who only thought about herself after all these years and everything. After turning off the recorder, I left. She fell silent as soon as she spotted me. I silently thanked Bill for supper and made my way out the door, ignoring my mother's persistent calls wondering why I was going so suddenly. She later messaged me to say that I had embarrassed her in front of her husband and that I should just be more honest with her because she is my mother after all. I haven't texted her back because I'm so mad at her. After hearing my mother talk about it, is I wrong to have left the table in the middle of dinner? First update. I want to make it clear that I have always accepted my mother for who she is, which is why I didn't go straight to her in her home after hearing what I did. To be honest, I wasn't overly surprised by it. I was correct to suspect that she had a hidden agenda from the beginning. In fact, I'm happy I got to meet her and have that tape. Tomorrow, I'm going to confront my maternal grandparents about it and find out the truth. Second update, I told my maternal grandparents everything when we met. They initially expressed a happy surprise at my mother's desire to get back in touch with me. However, their faces immediately changed when I played the tape of her telling Bill that the inheritance was her only motivation. While my grandmother apologized to me, my grandfather appeared enraged. She admitted that they had been talking about their inheritance lately and that 2 months prior, they had told my mother that they were too disappointed in her for leaving me, therefore they didn't want to leave her anything. Rather, their older children would receive the bequest. After my mother pleaded with them to change their minds, my grandfather informed her that she may be named in the will if she got back in touch with me. She had chosen to contact me out of desperation. My grandfather apologized awkwardly and said he felt it was a wonderful idea at the time, but I shook my head. After all these years, he told me he thought my mother had finally grown up, but he was obviously wrong. I told him not to put the blame on himself, but that my mother is merely self-centered and that he and my grandma should have known better. Fortunately, I saw her right away and wasn't duped. Rather than giving my mother her portion of the fortune, my grandfather vowed to give it to me instead. Third update. Not even a day after I spoke with my maternal grandparents, my mother called and yelled at me. I knew this was my opportunity to exact revenge on her and let everything out, so I hadn't intentionally blocked her. She said I should have spoken to her first and screamed at me for letting her see her parents. She threatened to destroy my life and said I had no right to confront Grandpa. Her remarks made me chuckle uncontrollably, and I forcefully informed her that I was no longer the child she had mistreated and left behind all those years prior. I inquired as to if her husband was fully aware of the type of woman she was or if I ought to give him a list of all the things she had done to me over the years. At that, she became quiet. I assured her that I would not think twice about publicly exposing her to all of our relatives and cousins if needed, and that I still had the video from the dinner where she admitted her true motivation. She changed her mind and insisted that because she gave birth to me, I should at least respect her as a parent and not threaten her. After months of pain, I sneered and told her that she had chosen to endure that, and that she couldn't continue to blame me for it after all these years. I said she had to leave my life as soon as possible because I was tired of her machinations. If not, I wouldn't think twice about ruining her life by telling everyone the truth. Since then, I have blocked her, and I doubt she would ever attempt to get in touch with me again. After years of being the invisible child in my family, my parents now pressure me to care for my disabled brother. When I started packing and left, my parents barely noticed. I was 33 years old, just out of graduate school, and ready to start my own career. However, I wasn't surprised by it. I had spent my entire life as the youngest of 5 children. I mean significantly younger when I say youngest. Diana, the next oldest, is 7 years older than I am. I'm different from the rest in a lot more ways. In our Massachusetts suburban home as a child, I occasionally felt like a ghost walking down the hallway. With therapy appointments recorded on many calendars, medication regimens displayed on the refrigerator, and the incessant sound of someone in crisis, our home was always in a state of organized chaos. I was left to handle this pandemonium by myself because my siblings were constantly taking care of their own problems. You hear of glass children, youngsters whose siblings demand so much attention that they are ignored or become invisible. I guess I was. My eldest brother Austin needed ongoing care due to serious mental health problems. Nathan battled addiction since he was a teenager. Mason was in and out of specialized care institutions due to a mix of mental and physical health issues. Diana suffered from extreme anxiety and depression. Then came me, the oddball, the one who didn't require anything. In primary school, I recall working on my math assignment at the kitchen table while my mother spoke with yet another doctor over Mason's illness. Occasionally, she would give me a quick glance, but her thoughts were elsewhere. After dropping Nathan off at rehab, Dad would arrive home late, too tired to inquire about my day. It became the norm. The symphony of crises that was my siblings' lives was drowned out by my accomplishments, my hardships, and my very presence. In retrospect though, I don't think that was intentional. I wasn't prioritized, but I also can't say that my early years were terrible. My bodily requirements were satisfied. I had clothing, food, and shelter. However, I didn't exist emotionally. No one asked how my day went or whether I needed homework assistance. When relatives inquired about all the children, I received the most attention in the form of the occasional, "Oh, Catherine's fine." It was out of necessity that I learned to amuse myself. My haven was our finished basement. My most dependable companions turned out to be video games. At least they recognized me and gave me rewards for my efforts. Books offered a way to enter imaginary realms where being normal wasn't a bad thing. I used to lose myself in imaginary worlds when Austin was having another episode upstairs, Nathan was going through withdrawal in his room, Mason was in the hospital again, and Diana was in her therapy sessions. I guess it was a survival strategy, although I didn't know at the time. I remained anonymous while honing my self-sufficiency skills. I wasn't required to volunteer as a caregiver, unlike some others who had ailing family members. All of that was handled by my parents. By the time I was 12, I was able to prepare my own meals, not because I was trained, but rather because occasionally people were too preoccupied with the most recent catastrophe to remember to eat. I taught myself how to manage my school calendar, wash the laundry, and live a quiet life. School presented a different kind of difficulty. When teachers found out that I was the youngest in the troubled family, they would occasionally give me that pathetic look, expecting me to be just another troublesome kid. However, they appeared somewhat let down when I proved to be a quiet, decent student, as though I wasn't living up to the family's reputation. By submitting assignments on time, never raising my hand until asked, and avoiding participation in groups or teams that may call for parental engagement, I also made myself invisible there. Rebecca and Jennifer were my saviors by the time I was 13. The one elective in middle school where I felt free to express myself without fear of criticism was painting class, where I first met them. We connected over that implicit understanding, even though their homes weren't flawless either. In addition to Becca's mother battling illness, Jen's parents were going through a difficult divorce. We didn't need to tell each other why we felt unheard or unnoticed. We would spend hours at one another's houses to avoid the drama in our own families. In an attempt to outdo her mom's house, we would raid Jen's pantry for the snacks her dad kept sending. On Becca's good days, we would assist her mother in the garden, feigning to make miraculous medicinal concoctions with the herbs. We would hide in the basement of my house, where the commotion upstairs seemed far away and muffled. There were new challenges in high school. The problems my siblings were having appeared to get worse every year. Austin attempted suicide twice and was admitted to the hospital. Nathan participated in 3 separate treatment programs. Mason's condition deteriorated to the point where he required placement in a long-term care facility. After graduating from college and returning home, Diana's room next to mine turned into a dark, anxious place. My relationship with my parents stayed distant throughout it all, but my relationship with Jen and Becca strengthened. We had our ups and downs, just like any other adolescent, but we remained close. We grew skilled at making up our own family customs, such as marathons of movies on the weekends, covert birthday parties, and late-night cookie baking sessions when one of us was having trouble falling asleep. It was not even a question when it came time to apply to colleges. We would go together, of course. We decided on a public university that provided courses for every interest we had. To be honest, though, it had nothing to do with academics or school. Our modest family and the only steady relationships we had ever known had to be preserved. For the first time, college felt like a breath of new air. Being 3 states away from home made the incessant hum of family crises seem like a faraway background noise. I poured myself into computer science lessons and found a universe where problems had obvious answers and logic and order were in control. We continued to live together in our apartment while Jen pursued marketing and Becca decided to pursue pre-law. We were inseparable for years. We strategically chose to go to a new area after college in order to look for work in a tech center that would provide prospects for all of us. We established our lives in a modest apartment building, some distance away from the mayhem we had previously experienced. We were now able to concentrate on ourselves rather than balancing the burdens of our families, which had been a burden for years. It was freeing. My software engineering career took off. At a promising business, I began as a junior developer and worked my way up through weekend and late-night tasks. Every promotion felt like confirmation that my prospects of succeeding had not been ruined by being the odd one out, the unseen one. In just 5 years, I rose to the position of senior software engineer, managing my own group and making important choices. I stopped communicating with my parents shortly after, and they hardly noticed. I didn't imagine they would suddenly become interested in my life now because, to be honest, we hadn't talked much even when I was living at home. My mother would occasionally text, generally with a casual message like, "How's work?" or "What's going on?" But we didn't actually discuss anything. It's better that way. At least that's what I believed. I was no longer in need of their attention. Becca and Jen were sufficient. Each of us had a prosperous career. Jen was doing well in marketing, Becca had recently become a partner at her law company, and I had advanced in the software industry. We each had our own goals and lifestyles, and for once, I didn't feel like the kid left behind. I was rather proud to have started a small family of my own. When my mother called last year, that began to alter. Thanksgiving was a few days away. I knew something was awry when her name appeared on my screen because I hadn't spoken to her on the phone in over a year. Questions were always raised by phone calls. She last got in touch with me to let me know about Mason's most recent hospital stay. She immediately got to work asking me what time I was leaving for Thanksgiving at home. I was, to put it mildly, perplexed. First of all, I was unaware that they were even celebrating Thanksgiving because we rarely honored holidays. I can count on one hand how many times we celebrated Thanksgiving and Christmas in a traditional manner as children. When we did attempt, it was generally when someone was in difficulty, like the year Austin lost it over the turkey or when Nathan got drunk and got into a fight with Dad. In short, our family did not celebrate holidays. They were just another day of handling emergencies and preserving the fragile equilibrium that prevented our home from collapsing. 3 years had passed since the last family get-together, which had ended with 2 ambulance calls and a police visit. We then decided in silence to cease acting like we could undertake everyday family activities. It was so strange to hear her ask such a question, considering our long-standing tradition. I told her I wouldn't be attending. For months, Jen, Becca, and I had been organizing a ski vacation. With 3 days' notice, I couldn't possibly cancel it. We had previously scheduled time off from work, purchased new ski equipment, and paid for the cabin rental. Aside from that, I couldn't afford a last-minute flight ticket during holiday prices because I lived 2 states away. I attempted to explain, but my mother didn't get it. She pretended that I was being deliberately challenging and guilt-tripped me by saying that she would be by herself because Dad was spending Thanksgiving with Mason at the institution where he is enrolled. Apparently, she would be alone most of the day while Dad was away. She depicted herself sitting by herself at a table that was deserted, while everyone else had somewhere to go. See, I got it. I understood why she wanted company, but she gave me 3 days' notice. Nevertheless, she began to imply that I didn't care about the family when she got upset when I informed her again that I couldn't make it. She said I was self-centered, had forgotten my origins, and had abandoned them, as I always had. I was aware of the irony of that final charge. After she hung up, I sat there for a while feeling a weird mixture of bitterness and remorse. Where had they been for me all those years, even though I felt guilty for abandoning her? When did I get my college degree? When did I get promoted for the first time? When did I purchase my first vehicle? Suddenly, I was the bad guy for not dropping everything to go home after months of not hearing from them. I combed over my previous communications, searching for anything I might have missed, any indication that they were interested in getting back in touch, any effort to establish a rapport. However, nothing was present. Thanksgiving is not mentioned. You didn't say you wanted to come see me. They didn't care about me until they needed me for something. What confused me more than anything was that it was just a last-minute guilt trip. Later that evening, I tried to be tactful when I contacted her. We had another vacation planned, which we had done for years, so I told her I wouldn't be able to make it for Christmas either. I mentioned that I would love to catch up once the year ended, and that perhaps we could arrange something beforehand the next time. She didn't answer. Not surprisingly. However, after a few days, the weird feeling that had infiltrated my stomach persisted. In hindsight, I think that phone conversation was only the beginning of something much bigger, something I didn't anticipate. At that time, however, I had no idea how far this issue would go. First update. I thought things would settle down after that odd Thanksgiving talk. However, a week or so later, my father texted me. I never get texts from my dad. When his name appeared on my phone, I thought it must be something serious because he tends to talk too much. However, what I read when I opened the message was unbelievable. I'm stopping your college payments if you don't come home for Christmas. I genuinely burst out laughing. 3 years prior, I had received my degree. There was nothing left to stop with the college payments. In an attempt to be lighthearted, I first believed that he could have confused me with Diana or another of my siblings. I assumed that would be the last word on it. Maybe check your bank account. 3 years without payments have passed, I said. Nevertheless, my phone buzzed once more a few hours later. The message was longer this time around. Yes, my father was really angry. He continued by accusing me of being self-centered, of failing to appreciate the sacrifices my parents had made for me and my brothers, and of leaving the family. At this point, I just gazed in awe at my phone. I had never once made a request of them. To be honest, I was unaware that they believed they were covering my education expenses. All of my costs, including tuition, had been covered by Grandma. She wanted my parents out of that part of my life, away from any influence they might try to have, and to be honest, I was delighted she had. My father was trying to put me through this whole guilt trip, and it seemed completely unexpected. I inhaled deeply before answering. I'm sorry you feel that way, but Grandma paid for my college. After the holidays, I'm happy to catch up, but I already have Christmas plans. Naturally, it didn't end the way I had hoped. Instead, he became more focused. He started talking about how the family was supporting me, how I was rejecting them, and how I didn't care about them twice. I was just finished by now. It was so absurd. I had been living alone for years. When I left, they barely noticed, and now, all of a sudden, I was leaving the family because I wouldn't be visiting for Christmas. I grew more irate the more I considered it. I wanted to brush it off, to ignore it. They hadn't gotten back to me in months. They hadn't inquired about my well-being or whether I needed anything. But I was supposed to abandon everything and rush home the moment they needed something. To vent, I called Jen and Becca. As usual, they got it right away. It sounds like your parents are just trying to use you to boost their own mood, Jen said. They don't really care whether you're there. Becca, who is always straightforward, expressed precisely what I was thinking. Screw them. They just want to feel like they've fulfilled their role as parents by getting you home for the holidays. You owe them nothing. I decided to sleep on it that night before responding to my father once more. I didn't want to make a mistaken statement. However, my phone buzzed again as I laid there attempting to let it go. My father sent me another note, this one chilly and succinct. If you don't come home, don't bother coming back at all. I froze as I gazed at the screen. How did we arrive here? From practically disowning me over Christmas to barely communicating with my own father. I felt like I didn't belong in that house, and I wanted to lash out at him for all the times they had ignored me. I just switched off my phone instead. I didn't want our holiday plans to be marred by this. Second update. My mother sent me a number of further notes when I got up the following morning. They were more of the same. They expressed their disappointment in me and their perplexity at my lack of communication. Here, too, I laughed a bit. They were just now realizing that I had been aloof my entire life. But there was something odd about these texts. I hadn't previously recognized the urgency between the lines of manipulation and guilt. I was really drawn to one message. We need to discuss Mason's future care arrangements. You're the only one stable enough to handle this. At that point, things began to come together. This has nothing to do with family time or Christmas. They wanted to tie me up in something more significant. That morning over coffee, I showed Jen the messages. I had never been able to read between the lines as well as she did. She added, calmly swirling her latte. They're planning something. This sudden interest in getting you home, the guilt trips, the threats, they want something from you, and it's not just holiday company. In search of any clues I could have missed, I spent the morning going through old emails and messages. They had been setting the foundation for months, and there were sporadic references to Mason's care facility getting more costly, my parents growing older, and ambiguous remarks regarding future arrangements. I simply hadn't noticed it. Their attorney sent me an official letter that afternoon. There was a draft document regarding Mason's guardianship arrangements within. I hadn't even been asked. They simply assumed that I would assume this enormous burden. The paper described monetary obligations, care needs, and legal duties that would fundamentally change my life. In the hopes that my sister could shed some light, I gave Diana a call. She sounded worn out and somewhat resigned. She said, "They've been talking about this for months. None of us are in any position to take care of Mason. Austin's still in and out of institutions himself, Nathan's barely staying clean, and I can barely take care of myself. You're their only option." I wrote a concise, forceful email to their counsel after hours of internal discussion. I clarified that I had my own life and work and that they needed to look into other possibilities because I would not be taking on Mason's guardianship. I included a personal remark and copied my parents on the email. "You should have asked me directly instead of trying to manipulate me into this." My mother's, father's, and Diana's phones began calling in a matter of minutes. All of them went to voicemail. I refused to be persuaded to change my viewpoint by guilt. Instead of using legal ambushes and manipulating holidays, they might politely and directly address Mason's care if they so desired. Third update. I didn't hear from my family for a week. I was beginning to believe that perhaps they had finally understood. Their family lawyer sent a certified letter to my office with a suggested care plan for Mason that was only focused on me accepting responsibility for him. A schedule was outlined in the letter. I was to begin assuming the role within the next 6 months. Information regarding financial responsibilities, medical decision-making authority, and power of attorney was included. They even suggested that I move closer to the family by including a real estate listing for a home close to Mason's care facility. Becca, who had done some elder law work during her internship, and I took the letter to lunch. With each page, her expression darkened as she carefully read it. "This is presumptuous even by legal standards," she stated. "They're essentially trying to restructure your entire life without your consent." My life would have been totally turned upside down by the care plan. They anticipated that I would return to their state, handle Mason's medical and financial matters, pay him frequent visits, and be available 24/7 for emergencies. Without ever requesting my consent, they had meticulously arranged every aspect. My mother contacted me again that night. Determining to speak directly, I picked up this time. She said, "We've already found a perfect house for you." Without even saying hello. "It's only 10 minutes from Mason's facility." "Mom," I said, "I'm not moving. I'm not taking guardianship of Mason. You need to stop planning my life without asking me." A long pause ensued. "We have no other choice, Catherine. Your father and I are getting older. None of your siblings are capable. You're the only one who can do this." Soon after, exhausted but determined, I hung up the phone. I wrote a formal answer that evening through my own attorney, clearly refusing to be a guardian and asking them to cease mailing me legal documents without my permission. I blocked their email addresses and phone numbers the following morning. They could contact me via the appropriate legal procedures if they so desired. I had had enough of being forced into a life I had never chosen. Update number 4. My mother's sister, Aunt Linda, unexpectedly showed up at my office 2 days after I blocked their numbers. Her appearance at work took me entirely by surprise because I hadn't seen her in years. She continued, "Your mother asked me to give you this." As she passed an envelope over my desk. A handwritten letter in my mother's recognizable cursive was inside. It wasn't one of her typical guilt trips. She told me something this time that she had never told me before. According to the document, my father was given an early-stage dementia diagnosis 6 months prior. Mason's deteriorating health was the cause of his recent hostile behavior, his sudden obsession with holiday get-togethers, and his last-ditch efforts to ensure his future care. Aunt Linda whispered, "We should have told you sooner," as she observed me reading the letter. "They're both scared, Catherine. Your father's condition is progressing faster than expected." Although I was deeply affected by the revelation, my stance remained unchanged. If anything, it strengthened my conviction that I couldn't care for Mason. They wanted more than just me to be Mason's guardian because my father's health was getting worse. They wanted me to someday take care of my father and him. I replied succinctly, expressing my condolences for Dad's diagnosis while restating my choice. "I can't be the solution to everyone's problems. I care about you all, but I won't sacrifice my entire life because you're afraid to look for other options." Aunt Linda accepted the answer and said she would deliver it. She stopped at my office door before she left. "They love you, Catherine. They just don't know how to show it without needing something from you. I sat in my apartment that night and looked through old family pictures. Their affection had always been accompanied by requirements, demands, and expectations that I had to meet. Love is insufficient at times, particularly when it only manifests when something is required in return. Fifth update. An unlabeled envelope showed up at my residence last week. In addition to a statement from my father's neurologist recommending family support meetings, there was a comprehensive medical report describing his health. Though they were employing various strategies, they were still attempting to entice me back in. My doorbell rang just as I was ready to throw it. As she stood there, my mother appeared older and smaller than I had remembered. She began chatting without waiting for an invitation, discussing Mason's growing care demands, Dad's declining health, and how she was unable to manage everything on her own any longer. She claimed, "I'm not here to guilt you," but in reality, she was doing just that. "But your father might not recognize you soon. Don't you want to spend time with him while he still knows who you are?" I stood in my doorway, feeling a familiar mixture of sympathy and rage. "Mom, I understand this is hard," I insisted. "But using Dad's condition to manipulate me isn't going to work. I've made my decision." She looked at me like I was a stranger. She whispered, "When did you become so cold?" "I'm not cold," I answered. "I'm protecting myself from being pulled into a situation that will destroy the life I've built. You had years to build a relationship with me, to show interest in my life. You can't demand everything now just because you're scared." She didn't say anything else, and I shut the door, fatigued but relieved. I contacted Jen and Becca that evening, feeling thankful once more for the family I chose instead of the one I was born into. Sixth update. Diana texted me this morning, and it completely altered my life. "Dad passed away last night. Thought you should know?" For what seemed like hours, I gazed at those words. Not a big lead-up. No reconciliation at the last minute. No heartfelt farewells. A straightforward text message declaring the dissolution of a complex relationship. Diana inquired further about the funeral plans, but I was already certain I wouldn't attend. I knew that being there would merely be another chance for manipulation, not because I was angry or spiteful. Mom would undoubtedly take advantage of the opportunity to bring up Mason's care, transforming even Dad's funeral into an opportunity to change my life to suit their purposes. I pondered my decision while sitting in my home office and gazing out at the metropolis I had created. I knew that was the best choice for me, even though some could describe it as cold or self-centered. Even in the face of death, the same courage that had enabled me to forge a life apart from the shadows cast by my family was now enabling me to uphold those boundaries. As soon as I notified Jen and Becca, they arrived with champagne and food. I finally broke down in tears as we sat on my balcony. Not only for Dad's passing, but also for the bond we were never able to have. For the acknowledgement that never materialized. For the father he didn't know how to be, and for the daughter I couldn't be. Later that night, Diana texted me again. "Mom's asking if you'll reconsider coming back now. Mason needs you more than ever." I didn't answer. Rather, I turned on my laptop and donated a sizable sum to an organization that helps persons with disabilities and those who care for them. Instead of taking part in what would inevitably turn into another family power battle, it seemed like a more heartfelt homage to Dad. I woke up feeling remarkably calm the following morning. Setting limits with family members might occasionally be the most difficult to uphold. However, they are frequently the most essential. I've discovered that leaving doesn't always imply cruelty. It is the ultimate act of self-preservation at times. I want to express my gratitude to everyone in this community for their understanding and support. Your feedback has made me feel less isolated in this choice. Thank you to everyone who has told a similar story. It has made me feel less bad about following my own route. To some who have implied that I'm being cold or self-centered, I respect your viewpoint, but I know deep down that this is the best decision for me. I was always seen as the disappointing daughter, while my sister was the golden child. The truth about her came to light at my wedding. I, 42F, have had a prosperous career as a research professor at a prominent institution, but I have always been the disappointing daughter in my family. I had to tell my tale now, after decades of silence. Since we were small, my younger sister Ava, 38 degrees Fahrenheit, has been the golden child, and their obvious partiality has finally reached a breaking point, shattering our entire family dynamic. The faint sting of comparison permeates my earliest recollections. When I was 8 years old, I recall sitting in my room excitedly reading my scientific books as my mother's voice could be heard downstairs. "Why can't you be more gregarious like your sister?" At the age of 6, Ava had already captured our parents' attention by entertaining their acquaintances in the living room with her theatrical acts. I spent hours disassembling and reassembling old clocks, interested in the mechanics of how things worked, while Ava was performing and receiving all the attention. It was an early pattern. I requested a chemistry set for my 10th birthday, but instead I received some used novels because books are more practical. 2 months later, Ava expressed interest in taking dance lessons, and our parents unexpectedly found money for private instruction, complete with new ballet shoes and specially designed tutus. That same year, when I sought to join the school science club, Mom groaned about the cost and advised me to concentrate on making friends instead. In those early years, my lone family ally was my grandma, Martha. Her home, which was only a few blocks away, turned into my haven. I would spend weekends with Grandma Martha while my parents took Ava to acting classes and dance performances. Before she retired, she taught science in high school, and she fostered my curiosity in a manner that my parents did not. "Your mind is a gift," she would say as she taught me about the constellations from her backyard or assisted me in doing easy experiments in her kitchen. When we were teenagers, the difference in how we were treated became glaringly apparent. My renewable energy project won the state science fair when I was 14 years old. My parents said they had to take Ava to a crucial audition, so they didn't even go to the ceremony. Our parents gave Ava a lavish celebration that year, inviting the whole extended family and even hiring a photographer, after she was cast in a small role in a local theatrical performance. High school was a haze of scholastic success that was not acknowledged at home. In addition to maintaining a 4.0 GPA, I served as president of the scientific club and editor of the school newspaper. Ava was starring in school plays and dating the football captain at the same time. Her social life and her theater endeavors were the topic of every dinner talk. If my academic achievements were recognized at all, they were just given a cursory nod. I had obtained a full scholarship to study biochemistry at a prominent university by the time my college acceptance letters arrived. When Ava decided she wanted to go to a pricey private institution for performing arts, our parents sold our vacation cabin to pay for her education. My mother's response, rather than one of pride, was, "At least we won't have to worry about your tuition." They remarked, "Ava shows such promise. We can't let her talent go to waste." I pushed myself into my studies during my undergraduate years, finding comfort in the lab where my intelligence and dedication were at last acknowledged. My teachers supported my academic endeavors and encouraged my research, becoming the mentors I had always desired. I received full financing for a prestigious PhD school after graduating with honors. Ava received a callback for a commercial audition, so my parents left early even though they were at my graduation. I effectively and steadily developed my career during my 20s and 30s. I obtained substantial research funds, published widely, and at 40, I was granted tenure, which is an uncommon accomplishment in academia. However, the topic of Ava's most recent acting career or her marriage to Richard, a prosperous real estate developer, always came up during family get-togethers. The conclusion drawn from my molecular biology research achievements was, "Oh, Emily's still doing her science things." When I met David, a researcher in my department, I felt like I had finally found bliss. He seemed to share my enthusiasm for scientific advancement and to comprehend me. Our partnership developed organically as a result of our same interests, and we worked together on multiple papers. I believed that when he proposed last year, I would finally have a typical milestone that my family could recognize and celebrate. However, things fell apart in the most catastrophic way last week. In order to finish some data for our most recent paper, I stayed late at the lab. I discovered David and Ava sharing a passionate hug on his desk when I went to his office to deliver the results. My fiancée and my married sister were having an affair. Even worse than the heartbreaking betrayal was what transpired afterward. Our parents were immediately worried about Ava when I told them. My mother begged, "Please don't tell Richard. Think about your sister's marriage. He has a prenup. She'll lose everything if this gets out." In agreement, my father said, "These things happen, Emily. You need to be the bigger person here." I've been the bigger person for 40 years. When they held lavish celebrations for Ava but missed my birthdays, I remained silent. They flew across the nation to attend Ava's community theater performances, but I remained silent when they missed my PhD defense. When they told me I needed to learn how to be financially independent but assisted Ava in purchasing her first home, I swallowed my hurt. Amidst all of this turmoil, an unforeseen event occurred. I met Michael at a university fundraising event 3 weeks ago. He was come to deliver the ideas for our new science facility. He is a 45-meter architect who creates research facilities. When I discuss my work, Michael listens with true attention, unlike David, who frequently engaged in intellectual competition with me. He poses intelligent queries and discusses his own imaginative technique for creating environments that support scientific advancement. When I called my grandmother, Martha, last week to tell her about Michael, She detected the shift in my voice. She remarked, "You sound lighter, dear. Tell me about this architect of yours." We spent 2 hours discussing everything, including how Michael's eyes light up when he talks about how art and science intersect in his designs, how he asked me to comment on his early sketches for the new research wing, and how, when we reconnected for coffee, he remembered every detail about my work. There is a clear difference between how my family treated David and how they responded to Michael. Whenever I brought about David at family get-togethers, they would instantly turn the topic to Ava's most recent accomplishments. However, my parents really stopped their normal compliments on Ava's acting career to listen when I brought up Michael to my aunt during a recent family dinner. Naturally, they were able to change it to Ava in a matter of minutes. "An architect, huh? Did you know that a well-known architect is married to Ava's yoga class friend? Tell Emily about him, Ava." I recognize the irony of my current circumstance. I've been a successful professional for decades, receiving recognition that my folks hardly notice. My mother is mainly worried about whether I'm getting enough light in the lab, even though I've published groundbreaking research that may result in new treatments for genetic illnesses. Ava, on the other hand, has alternated between little parts in community theater shows and commercials, and she is given the attention of an Oscar at every audition. For my work on cellular regeneration, I was awarded the coveted Morrison Grant last month. In my field, it's a huge accomplishment because only 3 researchers are chosen year nationwide. My mother said, "That's nice, dear, but did you hear about Ava's latest role?" when I called to tell her the news. In a national ad, she has 3 complete lines. They celebrated Ava landing the commercial part with a family supper later that week. My grant was not mentioned. In fact, I had visited David's office to show him the grant acceptance letter the day I saw him and Ava together. Since we had collaborated on some of the initial research, I assumed he would be pleased. Rather, I discovered him with my sister, clutching the doorframe in disbelief as my engagement ring glinted on my finger and her luxury dress was tied up around her waist. The events that followed seemed to have been a blur. David's rambling justifications about feeling neglected because I spent too much time in the lab, Ava's casual, "Oh Emily," as she adjusted her clothing, and my parents' anxious calls after I told them, all of which were intended to preserve Ava's marriage and reputation. Nobody ever inquired about my emotional state. As usual, I went to my lab the following day. My haven has always been science, the one field where hard work and intelligence are regarded more highly than flamboyance and where outcomes are more important than showmanship. I was able to spend a few hours immersed in actual problems with measurable answers as my graduate students talked about their most recent research. However, something had changed within me. For the first time in my life, I felt outraged rather than just wounded by my family's actions. I'm actually furious. It was a powerful, freeing wrath instead of the silent resentment I'd harbored for years. I recognized that I no longer needed their approval after glancing at the grant letter on my desk, the papers I had published, and the students eagerly awaiting my direction. It had been years since I needed it. I had dinner with Michael that night. Since the fundraiser, we had been hanging out informally, but I had been reluctant to divulge too much about my family's circumstances. I felt comfortable telling him everything because of his consistent presence and sincere interest in my opinions. His architect's eyes were analytical and concentrated as I explained 42 years of systematic dismissal and favoritism, and he listened without interjecting. Michael was silent for a while after I had done speaking. Then he said something that gave me a whole new perspective on my predicament. In the field of architecture, we occasionally come across structures that appear flawless on the outside but have serious structural problems that cannot be resolved by cosmetic remodeling. In these situations, the most considerate thing we can do is admit that the structure is no longer safe and construct a new one. I've tried being the ideal daughter, the smart researcher, the understanding sister, and I've minimized my accomplishments to avoid overshadowing Ava and downplayed them to spare my parents the cognitive dissonance of having to acknowledge them while maintaining their narrative of Ava as the special one. He's right. I've spent my entire life trying to fix a fundamentally flawed family structure. Grandma Martha, who is 92 years old and still as sharp as ever, always sees right through the dynamics of our family. Last night, I had supper with her. "Your parents have spent so much time making Ava the star of their show that they've forgotten there are other stories worth telling," she added, swirling her tea with a poise that belies her advanced age. "But you, my dear, have been writing your own story all along. Perhaps it's time to stop letting them edit it," she continued after taking my hand. "I am writing this now because I have made up my mind. Michael and I have been talking about getting married, not engaged yet, but headed that way. And when the time comes, I will not have a large family wedding, nor will I invite my parents or Ava, who will inevitably try to make it about her in some way. Instead, I will have a small celebration with the people who have truly supported me, including Grandma Martha, my Aunt Linda, my co-workers who appreciate my work, and Michael's family, who have shown me more sincere interest in 3 weeks than my own parents have in 42 years. I let Ava's attempt to call me go to voicemail yesterday, and she left a message saying that I'm overreacting to the situation with David and that she wanted to explain. She concluded by reminding me that she is my only sister and that families should forgive each other, which I deleted without answering. For the first time in my life, I'm putting my happiness ahead of my family's meticulously crafted story, choosing to be surrounded by people who appreciate me for who I am rather than who they wish me to be, and celebrating my accomplishments without downplaying them to stroke someone else's pride. But here's the thing, I'm a scientist, and I deal in observable facts. And the facts are that they broke up this family long ago, piece by piece, every time they chose to devalue one daughter in order to elevate the other. I know there will be fallout when my parents realize I'm serious about cutting contact. They'll probably tell everyone that I'm being dramatic, that I'm jealous of Ava's success, and that I'm destroying the family. I have my research, my students, my grants, and now, possibly, a partner who sees me clearly and values what he sees. So here I am at 42, finally prepared to do the most important experiment of my life, seeing who I can be without the weight of their expectations and disappointments. Perhaps that's more than enough. Perhaps that's everything. First update. 3 months have passed since my previous post, and a lot has transpired. Let's start with the good news. Michael and I are officially engaged. He proposed last weekend while we were going over the final blueprints for the new research center. He had concealed the ring in a blueprint tube, and it was the ideal combination of thoughtful, subtle, and wholly us. Let me give you a little background so you can see how far I've come. After the David and Ava disaster, I threw myself into the new research facility project, and working with Michael became my haven. As my family called me non-stop to ask me to forgive Ava and keep the peace, Michael and I spent long hours talking about how to create the ideal laboratory spaces. The interaction itself was a huge contrast to my experience with David, who made the proposal at a department meeting, making it all about getting attention from the public. With David, everything was a competition, who had more publications, whose research was more innovative. Michael, however, made it personal and significant. My Aunt Linda, who was sincerely delighted for us, sent the bad news to my parents, and within hours, my phone was overflowing with messages. "Why didn't you tell us you were seeing someone serious?" was Mom's initial reaction, rather than "congratulations. Ava may have compared you to her friend's architect spouse." The guilt-tripping then began. "We should have been the first to know. We're your parents." It didn't matter that they hadn't inquired about my life once in the 3 months since the David incident. They were too preoccupied with helping Ava cope with the anxiety of possibly being discovered having another affair. Mom called in tears, claiming that I was denying Ava her position as maid of honor and family tradition. When I reminded her that Ava wasn't even invited, she fell silent for a full minute before giving a speech about forgiveness and family ties. That's when the real drama began. Richard has been aloof ever since David, my ex-fiancé, began working as a personal trainer at his company's fitness center. Yes, you read correctly. David quit academia to pursue a career in personal training. It seems that he and Ava have been seeing each other at the gym. Richard isn't aware of this yet, but people are talking about it. During this trying time, Ava has been phoning me every day and left messages about how she needs her big sister. In contrast, my research has thrived amidst all of this turmoil. Last week, we were awarded further funding for our cellular regeneration study, and the grant committee particularly mentioned the creative lab design Michael and I created together as a contributing reason. Grandma Martha was thrilled when I contacted her to tell her the news. "That's my girl," she remarked proudly. His mother, a retired judge who truly knows the complexities of the situation, said me something that truly spoke to me. Family isn't about sharing DNA, it's about sharing respect. Michael's family has been incredible throughout this entire ordeal. One of my best friends is his sister, a professor of literature. Michael and I had our first real date in the botanical gardens, where he had asked me to discuss the greenhouse specifications for the new research facility. We ended up talking for hours about everything from architectural history to photosynthesis, which is why the wedding planning has been surprisingly calm, mainly because we are keeping it small and meaningful. Grandma Martha, who has been more of a parent to me than my own parents ever were, is the only member of my immediate family who will be there when Michael and I meet with her tomorrow to show her our wedding preparations, and to be honest, it seems perfect. Michael joins me for some sessions, and his insights as an architect often provide interesting perspectives. Emotional boundaries are like load-bearing walls. They're not about keeping people out. They're about maintaining structural integrity, he said in our most recent session. I've started going to a therapist to process all of this, and she's helping me understand that it's okay to set boundaries, even with family. For now, I'm concentrating on my research, my future spouse, and finally putting myself first. I'll provide another update once we have a clear wedding date. For the first time in my life, I feel appreciated and seen for who I am, not because I'm someone's sister or daughter. Second update. 2 more months have passed since my last update, and I wish I could report that things have improved with my family. The wedding is in 3 weeks, and instead of being a happy period of preparation, my parents and Ava have caused yet another family crisis. We meticulously organized everything, a small ceremony in the botanical gardens, followed by a private reception. I made it clear to my parents that Ava was not invited, and the guests were chosen to include my grandmother Martha, a few close relatives who have always been there for me, my coworkers, and Michael's family. My Aunt Linda called to warn me after overhearing Ava boasting about the surprise she was planning for my wedding, and it turned out that she had already purchased a dress that, in her own words, will show everyone what a real star looks like. I learned yesterday that my parents had not only informed Ava about the wedding details, but had actively encouraged her to attend. When I confronted my parents, they pretended that they were helping me. "We couldn't let you make the mistake of excluding your only sister," Mom said, adding, "She's got a beautiful speech about sisterly forgiveness. It will make the wedding so much more meaningful." This was the most frustrating part. They responded, "But she's going through such a difficult time with Richard. He's been so cold to her lately, and she needs her family's support." I had to reiterate that someone who had an affair with my ex-fiancé is not allowed to speak about forgiveness at my wedding. With his exact words, "The only dramatic performance happening at our wedding will be our vows." Michael, who has been tremendously supportive throughout this whole ordeal, quickly phoned our wedding venue to set up extra security after I informed him of Ava's planned intrusion. The irony that Ava's marriage to Richard is disintegrating at the same time that I'm starting a new life with Michael is not lost on me. Richard has finally begun to inquire about her frequent gym visits with David, and my Aunt Linda claims that there have been some tense arguments at their home. Nevertheless, in my parents' eyes, this makes Ava the victim who requires assistance rather than the mastermind behind her own demise. In addition to the gym, my colleague noticed David and Ava eating lunch together at a cafe close to the university, looking very intimate. I brought this up to my mother in the hopes that she would finally notice the pattern, but she dismissed it as Ava being a supportive friend to someone going through a career change. My parents tried a new strategy this week. Dad, who has never shown up at my lab without warning in my academic career, tried to persuade me that keeping Ava out would create a rift that can never be healed. The rift was created when you consistently chose her over me. It was widened when you dismissed her betrayal of my trust, I said, looking at him standing there, this man who had never taken an interest in my work. "Don't worry about Ava," Grandma Martha, bless her, assured me. "I'll be stationed at the entrance. She wouldn't dare try to get past me." Grandma Martha, who is 92 years old and still sharp as a tack and doesn't take foolish people well, offered to run interference on the wedding day. My research lab has become my haven during all of this chaos. The clarity of data analysis and the precision of scientific work are a welcome contrast to the emotional manipulation I'm dealing with at home. Michael's brother, who works in private security, has also arranged for a few colleagues to be present, disguised as guests. I've hired additional security for the wedding, though it pains me that I have to protect my own wedding from my sister's intrusion. The venue has been given photos of Ava and strict instructions not to allow her entry. 3 weeks before the wedding, I should be thrilled about marrying the amazing man who supports my career, knows my boundaries, and loves me for who I am, but instead I'm planning how to prevent my own sister from ruining my wedding day. My graduate students have noticed my increased presence in the lab, but they've been incredibly supportive. I will provide another update following the wedding. Regardless of Ava's presence, I am getting married to Michael. I will no longer allow my family's drama to overshadow my happiness. Third update, yesterday was the wedding, and while I wish I could say everything went well, my family did manage to pull off one last dramatic moment, but this time, something unexpected happened. The truth was revealed, and the fallout was both painful and freeing. Ava, as usual, wore a white dress that looked more appropriate for a red carpet event than a morning garden wedding, and our parents showed up at the botanical gardens despite all our precautions, my mother sobbing uncontrollably about how cruel it was to exclude them while my father tried to reason with the security team. When Grandma Martha and Michael's sister came, I was in the bridal suite with them, and as I saw the chaos at the door through the window, something inside of me finally broke. It all came to a head when I stepped out to the entrance still wearing my wedding dress after years of being the nice daughter, being silent as they denigrated me, and watched them justify Ava's actions. "Emily, how could you do this to me? I'm your sister." I came here to support you, to show you how much I love you, Ava said as she launched into her performance. When she saw Richard's car arrive into the parking lot, she stopped talking. Yes, it was Richard, her husband, who had reportedly followed her there. A scene from a movie played out when Richard confronted Ava about her relationship with David. Despite her best efforts to deny it, David called her phone, which was on speaker, and everyone heard him ask whether she would still be coming over later. My mother then turned to me and exclaimed, "Look what you've done. If you had just invited your sister properly, none of this would have happened," rather than confronting Ava about her actions. The last straw was that. I answered in a surprisingly composed voice. "No, Mom. These are her decisions, not mine. She chose to have an affair with my fiancé while she was married, to attend my wedding without being invited in white, and to keep seeing David behind Richard's back. 3 years ago, I found Ava and my then fiancé David, together in his office," I began, turning to our guests. When I told our parents, they never once asked how I was feeling. They were only concerned with protecting Ava's marriage because Richard has a prenuptial agreement. Richard's expression changed from hurt to angry. "A prenup? Is that why you've been pretending everything's fine?" he asked Ava, who revealed everything through mascara and tears. The affair with David had been going on before he and I were engaged, and she had pursued him out of boredom and because she couldn't stand that for once I had something she didn't. My parents, who were still apparently more worried about Ava's failing marriage than their other daughter's wedding day, followed as Richard turned and left without saying another word, and Ava ran after him while yelling his name. Following their departure, an extraordinary event occurred. The remaining guests, which included my co-workers, Michael's family, Grandma Martha, and the relatives who had consistently witnessed Ava's deception, surrounded us in a protective circle. Michael's mother, a retired judge, then asked, "Now, shall we have a wedding?" Michael's vows moved me to tears. He pledged to love me and to always see me, to value my mind as much as my heart, and to create a life based on mutual respect and understanding. The ceremony was lovely, with the gardens in full bloom and the morning sun casting a natural spotlight through the trees. My Aunt Linda told me today that Richard is divorcing Ava, and the prenuptial agreement means she will receive nothing. My parents are inconsolable, trying to find out how to support her, but for the first time in my life, I don't feel compelled to join in the drama. In between hiking excursions and wine tastings, Michael and I will be visiting some of the most cutting-edge research facilities in the world on our 2-week honeymoon in New Zealand, which is the ideal fusion of science and leisure, much like us. Some of the most significant experiments are the ones where everything goes wrong but you end up discovering something revolutionary, Grandma Martha observed when she called to see how I was doing this morning. As always, she is correct. Amid all of that craziness, I found my own strength. I'm not sure what the future holds for my family, but I'm concentrating on my new life with Michael, my research, and the family we've chosen, one based on genuine love and respect for one another rather than duty and rivalry. I have a feeling my parents will eventually try to get in touch with me, most likely to ask me to help Ava get back on her feet. It's time to begin my honeymoon with my amazing spouse, who loves me because of my commitment to science, not because of it. This will be my last update. Cheers to fresh starts, unambiguous boundaries, and at last, the freedom to be who I truly am. My parents rejected me when I chose a blue-collar life, but now they want back in. Am I the asshole for refusing to help? Growing up in a wealthy Chicago suburb with a father who is a well-known professor at Northwestern University and a mother who is the stereotypical faculty wife, I, 35F, have always been the challenging twin. Early on, I discovered that I was supposed to take a very certain route. The ideal daughter, my 35-foot twin sister, accepted everything our parents desired. She epitomizes all of our parents' dreams, married a wealthy lawyer, and lives in a lovely home in Lincoln Park. From my earliest recollections, our house resembled a meticulously organized museum, with each item having its own location. While my mother's realm was the spotless living room where she invited faculty spouses for afternoon tea, my father's study was crammed with leather-bound volumes and academic honors. My sister and I were expected to be living examples of their success even as kids, well-groomed, well-behaved, and constantly successful. Early on, the difference between us became apparent. My sister was very good in charm school and piano recitals, but I liked to lose myself in science fiction books and watch motorcycle races on TV in secret. Our mother's constant correction was the answer. Sit up straight, sweetheart, don't cross your legs, cross your ankles. Every instruction was given with a smile that never quite made it to her eyes. Do try to smile more. The pressure definitely increased in high school. My sister became a member of every club that was relevant to her, including debate team, student government, and Young Republicans. Despite being compelled to do so, I didn't want to. I proposed setting up a fundraiser for a nearby motorcycle maintenance training program for at-risk teenagers during a particularly memorable student council meeting. For weeks, I was plagued by the terrified expression on my mother's face when she learned about it. The impact of our father was not limited to our household. He was well known in Chicago's intellectual and corporate circles as a renowned economics professor at Northwestern. These relationships served as the foundation for our futures and were more than just social capital. Through his network, every summer internship, college application, and employment opportunity was meticulously planned. I can still clearly recall the day he declared that he had gotten me accepted into Northwestern's economics program. I was shoving the remnants of my mother's expertly presented roast beef around in our formal dining room. He said, "It's all arranged," without raising his gaze from his wine glass. "Professor Richardson owes me a favor. You'll start in the fall." From the other side of the table, my sister, who is already in her second year of business administration, smiled. I could feel the walls closing in, yet I was at a loss for words. My life has always gone like that. I follow the meticulously prepared tracks even if my inner voice begs for a different course. Because it's what responsible young ladies do, I earned my MBA. I choose to work in corporate strategy at one of the best companies in Chicago because it's a fantastic opportunity. My entire career has been a masterclass in following expectations rather than pursuing my own desires. My everyday schedule is the ideal representation of the life I should aspire to. My wake-up time is 5:30 a.m. My mother picked my high-rise apartment on Michigan Avenue since it's a popular place for young, successful professionals to dwell. During required shopping trips with my mother and sister, I wore designer suits that were more expensive than other people's monthly rent. My mother constantly adds, "Appearance is everything in the business world, dear," suggesting a more conservative heel height or changing my collar. People who are living examples of what my parents want me to be are all around me at work. On most days, I hardly notice the breathtaking view of Lake Michigan from my 47th floor corner office. Rather, I meet with people who seem to actually care about quarterly estimates and shareholder value for hours on end to discuss market strategies and profit margins. With a passion I can't seem to summon, they enthuse about their vacation houses in Lake Forest, their children's private schools, and their memberships in country clubs. In an effort to keep us close, our mother insists that my sister come to lunch with me every Wednesday. Perfectly groomed and typically fresh from a board meeting at one of her numerous charitable organizations, she comes at precisely 12:30. She tells me about her picture-perfect life over expensive salads at the trendy restaurant below, including her husband's recent high-profile case, their plans to buy a second house in Aspen, and the prestigious daycare where their child is already on the wait list. She gently wiped her lips with a handkerchief last week and advised me, "You should join the junior league. Mother thinks it would be good for your social connections. Besides, you need to start thinking about marriage. All the best eligible men are involved in charity work." I instinctively agreed, as I've come to do when my family offers advice on how to live my life. In all honesty, this world of manufactured perfection is smothering me. While my colleagues enthusiastically debate market penetration tactics and hostile takeovers in meetings, I can't help but stare at the construction workers in the building across the street. They're making something substantial, doing something real. I can be so envious of them at times that it hurts. I found myself scribbling motorcycle ideas in the margins of my notes during a particularly dull budget discussion last month. Upon noticing, my direct report looked at me with anxiety. I promptly turned to a blank page and made myself concentrate on the supply chain efficiency optimization PowerPoint presentation. I heard him express concern to another management later that day over my dedication to the company's mission. Weekends are the worst. I'm stuck driving through the city's industrial areas while my sister and her husband go to country club parties and charity galas. I pretend that I'm working late, but in reality, I'm drawn to the unadulterated, authentic elements of Chicago that they deny exist. I observe those who make things with their hands and appear to truly like what they do, such as welders at their shops, artists in their studios, and mechanics working on automobiles. Everything changed last night. My BMW, my father's thoughtfully selected graduation present, began to make a menacing grinding sound after yet another heartbreaking day of acting as though I cared about market forecasts. I was in the wrong part of town, as my mother used to say, but I had to stop or risk getting stuck. Just before closing time, I stopped into a nearby auto repair shop and saw the check engine light flash mockingly. I met Jake at that time. With a welding torch in hand, Jake, 35, was the final guy left working, hunched over a handmade motorbike frame. Jake was authentic, work boots, faded trousers, and hands that demonstrated he truly made a living, in contrast to the polished business people my parents are constantly attempting to pair me with. He looked up and grinned, but it wasn't the staged smile I see at business events. It was sincere, it extended to his eyes. "Timing belt's about to go," he observed, having listened to my engine for less than a minute. "I can fix it now if you want to wait." Simple competence without any corporate language or ulterior motives. Even though I could hear my mother's disapproving voice in my mind about being in that neighborhood after dark, I found myself nodding. We chatted while he worked. Jake shared with me his experiences progressing from simple welding to more complex metalwork, his aspirations to start his own custom fabrication business, and his passion for creating things by hand. He showed me the motorcycle he was restoring, which fused contemporary engineering with vintage design. My practiced presentations about market expansion strategies seemed insignificant in comparison to the enthusiasm in his voice as he described the technical specifics. He said, "Want to see something cool?" He fixed my car and then showed me a part of the business with a number of finished projects. Every piece was distinct, the ideal fusion of creativity and utility. After years of moving papers in my corner office, I felt more a part of actual production as I ran my fingers over the beautiful curves of the metal. We ended up sipping coffee from the shop's antiquated vending machine and spoke until long after midnight. Jake told me about his upbringing with a single mother who was a nurse, his time at community college studying his craft, and the joy he gets from making something enduring by hand. I started talking more about my life, including the oppressive expectations, the constant comparisons to my sister, and the increasing sense that I was living someone else's fantasy. "You know," he began slowly, "metal's interesting. People think it's rigid, unchangeable, but with the right heat and pressure, it can become anything. Sometimes the most beautiful pieces come from metal that's been stressed and reformed." I did not fail to notice the metaphor. I've been seeing Jake practically every day since that night. After work in the shop, he has been teaching me the fundamentals of welding. The process itself is immensely fulfilling, the concentration needed, the observable outcomes, the way two disparate parts are permanently fused together. In contrast, nothing feels real in the fleeting realm of business strategy. Jake took me on my first motorbike ride around Lake Michigan last weekend. There were no conference calls, shareholder expectations, or family pressures, just the wind, the road, and the sensation of being fully alive. The freedom was exhilarating. In Wisconsin, we made a stop at a tiny diner, the kind of establishment my mother would never enter. It was the best coffee I've ever had at any of Chicago's best eateries. Jake is taking me to meet his mother tomorrow. Despite being retired, she continues to volunteer at the nearby hospital. Instead of the required awe I give my parents at Sunday dinners, he speaks about her with such sincere love and respect. I've never been more anxious before a corporate presentation than I am now. What's coming, I know. My folks will need to hear about Jake soon. My mother will weep, my father will threaten to cut me off, and my sister will be appalled. However, I'm prepared to make my own decisions for the first time in my life. I feel like I'm finally becoming into the person I was destined to be, not the person my parents wanted me to be. When Jake smiles at me. Perhaps having the guts to live genuinely is what true success looks like, rather than having a prominent location or corner office. I feel more alive than ever, yet I'm also scared. First update. 3 months have passed since my previous post, and a lot has changed. When I eventually told my parents about Jake, it was a complete disaster, worse than I could have imagined. I decided to tell them during our Sunday meal, which was required. My father's face went a shade of crimson I had never seen before when I revealed that Jake was a welder. My mother let her sterling silver fork fall to the exquisite china, clattering. Like a gunshot, the boom reverberated across our suddenly quiet dining room. My father spat the phrase, "a welder," as if it were toxic. "After everything we've invested in you, after all the connections I've built." For about 20 minutes, he launched into a tirade about family reputation and social status. My mother would alternate between giving me looks of complete betrayal and wiping her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief. At first, my sister, who was there with her lawyer husband, genuinely chuckled, assuming it was a joke. Her face took on an expression of sheer fear as she realized I was genuine. She growled from the other side of the table. "You can't be serious. What about Richard from the golf club? His family's been asking about you." When I told Jake that I was thinking of quitting my corporate position to assist him in launching his custom fabrication company, the situation became heated. My father got to his feet so suddenly that his chair toppled over. "You are no longer welcome in this family if you pursue this absurd fantasy," he said, his voice shaking with anger. The peace that swept over me at hearing it was unexpected, but I had anticipated the threat. My sister's expensive outfit, my mother's exquisitely placed flowers, the oil paintings, and the crystal chandelier in the formal dining room all seemed to me to be of no use anymore. I said, "Then I guess this is goodbye," and got to my feet. Despite my mother's theatrical gasp, I kept gathering my belongings. My sister followed me into the foyer as I made my way to the door. She cautioned, "You're making a huge mistake. You're throwing away everything we were raised to be." "No," I said, getting stronger every step of the way. "I'm finally becoming who I really am. There have been many developments over the last 3 months. To the surprise of my coworkers, I left my corporate job. An emergency board meeting was called in response to my resignation letter, and my former employer continues to send me letters every week urging me to come back. Jake and I have been working tirelessly to launch our own company. In an industrial neighborhood, we discovered the ideal location. Although it needs some maintenance, there is a lot of potential and the rent is fair. My commercial experience is proven surprisingly helpful in establishing up our organization, and Jake's underwater welding talent has already drawn several significant clients. Jake's mother has provided the most surprising assistance. Warm, accepting, and truly interested in who I am rather than what she believes I should be, she is everything my mother is not. She arrived with homemade sandwiches and old trousers to assist us with painting the office area of our new store. I had never felt more at home in my parents' estate than I did when she embraced me, splattered with paint. Through her husband's legal practice, my sister issued me a formal letter last week requesting that I change my ways and rejoin the family. She reminded us of our family's reputation in Chicago society and provided a comprehensive list of available corporate jobs and eligible bachelors. I lit the new wood stove at our workshop using the letter. Finding a community I was unaware of has been the most unexpected development. We have been greeted warmly by our neighbors in the industrial area. We get coffee in the mornings from the car repair shop next door, and the local artists collective has already commissioned a number of custom metal works for their next show. Next month, Jake and I will tie the knot. There won't be a country club reception, a beautiful gown, or the society wedding my parents have been planning for me since I was born. In the workshop, surrounded by the things we've created together and the individuals who genuinely support us, we're holding a modest ceremony instead. The invitation was sent back unopened by my parents. Another legal letter from my sister threatened to declare me mentally incompetent. However, I can tell I've made the correct decision when I watch Jake work, witness his commitment to his trade, and experience the joy of creating something tangible. I saw my reflection on a polished metal piece this morning while assisting Jake with a challenging welding project. I felt more attractive and more like myself than ever before, even though I hardly recognized myself, work boots, jeans, and almost pulled back hair. Even if my family no longer approves of me, I've gained authenticity, which is far more valuable. In my new life, every burn from hot metal, every callus on my hands, and every late-night business brainstorming session are all medals of glory. Second update. After 6 months of marriage, Jake and I have experienced some unexpected changes in our lives. The most exciting news is that Jake's underwater welding certification has opened up contracts we never thought were feasible. Due in large part to Jake's specialist abilities being in great demand for marine infrastructure projects, our tiny business has grown quicker than we could have imagined. We secured a significant underwater repair contract with the Chicago Port Authority last month. I recognize the irony. The same blue-collar jobs that my parents mocked now generate more money each year than my previous corporate job did. With more specialized tasks, our custom fabrication business is flourishing, and Jake's salary has risen to $150,000. However, success has presented unforeseen difficulties. Surprisingly, word of our expanding company made its way to my former corporate circles in Chicago's industrial area. My old coworkers have begun contacting me, some with sincere congrats, others with barely concealed interest in our small business. My former boss called last week to propose a consultancy arrangement. I declined courteously. Our appearance in a local business publication was the biggest step forward. The article highlighted our special blend of technical know-how and business savvy, with a focus on successful career transitions. For the first time in months, my sister texted me the morning it was released. The article was read by me. "Congratulations, I guess," she wrote. "Jake's mother is no longer only his mother-in-law. I've always hoped I had a parent like her. She frequently stops by the shop with handmade food and a sincere interest in what we do. She recently assisted us in setting up a training program for aspiring welders, a cause close to her heart after witnessing the transformative power of welding on her son's life. Our workshop has developed into a gathering place for the neighborhood. In addition to hiring 3 local apprentice welders, we have begun providing weekend workshops for those with an interest in metalworking. We have worked with a number of local artists on public art projects, and the owner of the car repair company next door sends his younger mechanics to learn from Jake. The work's physical demands have altered me in unexpected ways. Work clothes that are useful have taken the place of my luxury suits, which are still hanging unworn at the back of our wardrobe. I have developed muscles I never knew existed, and my hands are now calloused. There are more than just physical improvements though. I now carry myself with a confidence that comes from doing something real rather than merely promoting papers. An unusual encounter occurred last week. At our workshop, I was overseeing a delivery when a beautiful Mercedes arrived. My sister's husband came out, looking totally out of place in his fitted suit. His legal firm wants to hire us to do some underwater inspections on their marina properties, therefore he would bring a business proposal. It was an uncomfortable but illuminating conversation. He acknowledged that everyone was surprised by our achievement. He hesitated before departing, saying, "Your sister follows your business in the news, but your father still won't talk about it. You seem different," he said to her. "Happier?" My mother would be horrified by the rhythm that has been established in our home life. We decided to put practicality ahead of elegance and purchased a modest home in a developing neighborhood. Our furniture is a combination of items we welded ourselves and old treasures. Although the garden isn't as well kept as my parents' estate, it is thriving with herbs and vegetables that we utilize on a daily basis. The wedding pictures, which were taken by a local artist who captured the genuine moments, arrived lately rather than by a society photographer. One shows Jake and I in safety gear, totally focused on the task at hand as he teaches me how to weld an ornamental arch for the ceremony. Another depicts us dancing in the workshop with our chosen family and our creations. As I look at them, I see that we have created something that, in spite of their wealth, my parents never had. True happiness. We've begun discussing starting a family, which raises more questions. I consider the principles we wish to impart. The value of creating, pursuing your own path, and gauging success based on fulfillment rather than prestige. My own parents have no idea that they could ever have grandkids, and Jake's mother breaks down whenever we bring up the subject. I found out yesterday that our workshop had received an invitation to my sister's forthcoming charity event. The note in the envelope wasn't what I expected, but it was addressed in her well-known handwriting. "I miss you," she sent. I haven't replied yet, but I said, "Maybe we could talk." A part of me understands that I can never return to my former self, but another part of me wants to make amends. Our most recent endeavor is a massive public artwork for the city that consists of several metal sculptures that symbolize change. I consider how much we've changed together as I watch Jake work on it, transforming metal into flowing shapes that seem to defy their material nature. Me from a corporate puppet to someone who at last feels real, and him from a talented carpenter to a prosperous business owner. The silent moment when we all shut up the workshop is the highlight of the day. Looking at what we've created, both the actual company and our life together, makes me feel accomplished in a way that no corporate success ever did. Even though my hands are rough today and my clothes smell like metal and honest labor, my heart is fuller than it was in my past existence. Life tends to come full circle. I hadn't seen my parents in more than a year until they unexpectedly dropped by our studio yesterday. They appeared smaller in some way. Northwestern's scandal had cost them dearly. Due to claims of harassment, my father, who was once a proud professor, was forced to leave. The very thing they valued above all else, their social standing, had fallen apart. My mother's fancy shoes were totally out of place on the store floor, and they stood clumsily in our workspace. Their superbly designed clothing stood out sharply against the background of our welding tools and ongoing projects. First to speak, my father's voice lacked the authority it usually possessed. In between my mother's hardly contained cries, the story poured out, "We need your help." My sister's husband, the accomplished lawyer they had always commended, refused to assist until they paid his entire legal bill after the scandal surfaced. My sister sided with her husband when they were unable to pay his rates. They were ordered to vacate the guest home at my sister's house where they had been residing. My mother remarked sourly, "Your sister believes it will harm her reputation." The irony of what she said didn't escape my notice after everything we did for her. I recalled all the times they had cautioned me that picking Jake would harm the family's reputation. My father surveyed our studio, his gaze resting on the honors we had just received for our unique workmanship. The wall was framed with an article from the local newspaper about our success. From corporate to creative, local welding business makes waves. He said the words, "We thought perhaps we could stay with you for a while, with difficulty." Behind me, I sensed Jake's steady, encouraging presence as usual. He quit his job, but he didn't get involved, so I was free to manage my family the way I wanted. That small gesture of respect and trust said a lot about our relationship. When I truly looked at my parents, I realized what they were no longer able to conceal. The flawless facade was crumbling, and the fine clothing were a little shabby. They were here because they had nowhere else to go, not because they had accepted me or my decisions. No, I answered in a firm voice. You can't stay with us. The phrase released something I had been holding onto for too long, like a key turning in a lock. You threw me out of the family when I chose this life. You can't come back now just because you need something. My mom's face fell flat. She begged. But we're your parents. A hint of my father's former authority emerged as his face darkened. After everything we've done for you. I cut in. That's exactly the problem. Everything you did was to control me, to make me fit your image of success. When I found my own way, you disowned me. And now that my way has proved successful, you want back in? I pointed to our workshop. See all this? The business you thought was beneath you? It's thriving? The husband you rejected? He's more successful than most of your country club friends. The life you said would embarrass the family? It's featured in business magazines. But that's different, countered my father. We can see now that you've made something of yourself. No, I interrupted him once more. That's not different at all. You still don't get it. I didn't need to prove anything. My worth isn't measured by income or social status. I'm happy because I'm finally living authentically, not because we're successful. After a while, they departed, my father stiff with rage and my mother in tears. As we saw their fancy car drive out, Jake gave me a hug. Simply, "You okay?" he inquired. I was more than fine, I had freedom. As we shut down the store later that night, I reflected on the path that had led me here. The corporate job I had detested, the familial pressure I had fled, the love I had discovered, and the company we had established. I had been moving toward myself with each step I took away from my parents' expectations. I came to a surprising realization while examining our most recent project, a sophisticated metal sculpture that the city had commissioned. Life occasionally requires extreme heat and pressure to create something beautiful, much like the metal we deal with. That heat had been my parents' rejection, and I had grown stronger and more authentic as a result. They failed to realize that they were giving me a cage by attempting to reintegrate me into their culture. Regardless of how plated. With a partner who loves me for who I am rather than what he wants me to be, my home is now here, surrounded by steel and sparkles. I appreciate the Reddit community's support during this trip. Your advice and support kept me going when I was having self-doubt. I'm thankful for this platform that allows me to share my story because sometimes the most difficult decisions are the best ones. To everyone who must make similar decisions, remain loyal to who you are. Although the journey may be more difficult, the end result is worthwhile. My brother overheard his wife asking me to pay to edit out my disabled daughter from their wedding photos and immediately kicked her out. My younger brother David married Amelia, the joy of his life, just 2 weeks ago in a lovely and touching ceremony. Everyone who knew David could tell how much he loved Amelia, and he had been anticipating this day for a long time. Their invitation cards made it apparent that their wedding was once intended to be a totally child-free affair. That being said, David called me a few weeks prior to the wedding. He surprised me by telling me that he wanted to make an exception for my daughter Katie, who is his niece. Startled, I asked him if he was certain. David told me how much he adores Katie and that without her as their flower girl, he couldn't have the wedding. Hearing him say it nearly brought me to tears. Uncle David has always had a special place in Katie's heart, and she adores him. David reassured me that he had discussed it with his bride, and she was also in agreement. His sincerity was evident in his voice. He realized how much it would mean to Katie and didn't want her to miss such a significant day in his life. To put things in perspective, my daughter Katie was partially paralyzed at birth. The fact that she is unable to move her body beneath her arms has undoubtedly changed our lives. My husband Roger and I were devastated as parents when we first learned. The ground seemed to have been yanked out from beneath us. We refused to accept the diagnosis and were in total astonishment. We visited several doctors in a frantic attempt to get a different viewpoint in the hopes that someone could know the answer. We hoped for positive results from every test we could think of. We wanted to think that there could be a procedure or therapy available that could help Katie and give her the life she was due. However, the response was always the same, regardless of our actions or where we went, nothing could be done. It was really difficult to accept that our daughter's situation was irreversible. We went through a difficult period that was full of tears, insomnia, and unanswered questions. We were totally powerless. Every time we considered Katie's future, our hearts ached while we gazed at our darling daughter. We gradually started to locate and establish connections with other families who were traveling the same path as us, which provided us with some comfort despite the overwhelming sense of powerlessness. We began concentrating on what Katie could do and providing her with as much love and support as we could, rather than on what she couldn't accomplish. Uncle David is among those who have consistently brought Katie happiness and light. Her illness never caused him to treat her differently. He actually has a knack of making my daughter feel so relaxed and at ease that her illness seems to vanish when they are together. I've always valued this, especially when other family members can occasionally, even unintentionally, make situations difficult or uncomfortable. For instance, my own mother was obviously shaken when she first saw Katie after she was born and saw how paralyzed she was. Her response surprised me, even though I knew it was a tough thing for her to digest. Rather than provide consolation or encouragement, she drew me away and whispered that I ought to attempt to conceive another child. One that could walk. When I heard her remarks, my eyes widened in surprise. My mother persisted in pressuring me, suggesting that perhaps if I tried again, I would have a better baby. It seemed as though Katie's illness made her insufficient or unworthy. I was taken aback. What a callous thing it was to say. David, however, defended me right away and chastised our mother for being so callous and cruel. He assured her that Katie was ideal just the way she was and that she didn't require comparison or replacement. When he stood up for my child, I will always remember the ferocity in his voice. When I was still grieving and accepting the reality of Katie's condition, he chastised our mother for pressuring me to become pregnant. Since then, I have minimized my interaction with my mother and have forbidden her from spending any alone time with Katie. In the meantime, David would visit my daughter every weekend, rain or shine, simply to be with her. They would play games, watch ridiculous shows, or just joke around for hours. Katie would light up for a few hours on those weekends in a way that was so innocent and happy. She can simply be a child enjoying herself with her worldly favorite. Both she and we have benefited from their relationship. I was therefore really moved when he called to ask if I might make an exception so that my daughter may attend his wedding. In addition to being a lovely way for David to celebrate their relationship on his special day, I knew that letting Katie be there would mean the world to her. I was thrilled for Katie to be a flower girl, so I consented to bring her along. I don't believe his wife Amelia was as excited about the prospect of having Katie at the wedding as David was. Amelia contacted me directly a few days after David called to give me the invitation for Katie. She told me that in order for her to let Katie attend their wedding, she had some requirements. The conditions annoyed me because they were strangely detailed. Initially, Amelia demanded that Katie wear a beige dress, which she described as flowing and appropriate for the wedding atmosphere. She also stated that Katie's hair had to be styled so as not to detract from the beauty of the wedding. Her demands were so domineering that I was surprised. But I decided to keep my mouth shut. After all, we had to follow her wedding theme because it was her wedding. I nodded in agreement and promised to follow her instructions because I didn't want to cause any conflict or discomfort for David. Ultimately, my top priority was for Katie to be able to support her uncle. I went out right away and got Katie a gorgeous beige dress. Amelia urged me to purchase it since it was understated yet sophisticated. My daughter would feel unique, I knew. Since Amelia had requested that I give her a photograph of the outfit after I bought it, I snapped a picture of it and sent it to her. To my astonishment, she wasn't satisfied, even though I had anticipated she would be. Amelia soon responded that the garment appeared lifeless and was too bland. I would like something a bit more colorful, she replied. I was perplexed and angry. Isn't this precisely what she requested? I didn't want to protest or argue, though. I was trying to maintain the peace as best I could. This time, I chose to send her a couple options before making a purchase rather than wasting my money on another dress that I bought on my own. I didn't want to spend money on something that she would undoubtedly turn down once more. When Amelia eventually selected one of the outfits I had received, I was astounded by what I saw. The dress she picked was almost the exact same shade of beige as the one I had previously purchased, which she had critiqued for being too beige. The slightest trace of a pinkish tone, which was almost perceptible, was the sole difference. I began to realize then that this had nothing to do with the dress or the color. Amelia was purposely complicating matters. She seemed to be putting me to the test or creating barriers to force me to do things that I didn't want to do. She hadn't told me outright, but there might be a reason why she didn't want my daughter to attend the wedding. I didn't want to cause her any unnecessary trouble. She needed to speak with my brother and work things out if she wanted to remove my daughter from the invitation. But she never did, and the wedding proceeded according to schedule. Katie looked magnificent as she walked down the aisle in her gorgeous beige dress, the one that Amelia had finally approved, on the day of my brother's wedding. As she wheeled forward, the dress flowed elegantly, and she paused to fling flower petals, her face beaming with joy. The whole room seems to stop. The visitors let out a loud gasp, and then there was a round of applause. As she continued down the aisle, distributing flowers and making her steady progress in her wheelchair, I could feel the excitement emanating from her as people couldn't stop gushing about how lovely she looked. At that moment, I was overcome with pride and love for my daughter. One of the memories I will always cherish is seeing her there, taking full part in such a momentous occasion. My eyes filled with tears of happiness, and I looked at David, whose face reflected mine. He grinned warmly and proudly as he gazed at Katie, obviously moved by her presence and her luminous personality. David approached her as she arrived at the front and knelt down to offer her a warm embrace. Their heartfelt moment together revealed a lot about their strong relationship. After ensuring she was comfortable and able to participate in the ceremony from the front row, he assisted her in positioning herself to the side. Amelia started walking down the aisle a short while later. As she made her way to the altar, she was undoubtedly stunning in her wedding gown. I couldn't help but notice that she looked at Katie for a moment. I briefly hoped that she might smile at my daughter, showing some appreciation for her presence and the part she played in this significant day. However, without even a faint grin, Amelia gazed past Katie and rolled her eyes visibly. It was impossible for me not to feel disappointed. Nevertheless, I decided to ignore the idea because I didn't want anything to ruin the day's happiness. I was ecstatic for my brother when David and Amelia exchanged vows and the officiant pronounced them husband and wife. Nothing else mattered at that time since he had at last found someone with whom to share his life. His happiness filled my heart with pride and happiness. We got together as a family for photos during the photo session following the ceremony. David made sure Katie was in every photo we took, and the love and solidarity we all had that day were captured in a ton of images. I couldn't help but notice that Amelia seemed a little strange during the photo shoot. I initially assumed that she was simply weary because she kept huffing and moaning heavily. Weddings are tiring, so perhaps she just needed a respite from shooting so many pictures. However, her behavior got more difficult to ignore as the session went on. Amelia's expression changed considerably as David took Katie up and held her in his arms for a photo. Her eyes were fixed on them, and she had a dissatisfied smile that wavered. Though subtle, it was obvious enough to unnerve me. Amelia approached me after we had taken a number of shots with Katie, asking if I could wheel her out so she could take some pictures with her family alone. Her tone was courteous but short. I was surprised by the request, but I granted it. Katie and I went to the reception to sit with my parents. I was fortunate to have a daughter like her, my mother said, acknowledging my daughter's beauty. Although it was a little gesture, I was pleased to see my mother overcoming her prejudices and coming to terms with my daughter's identity. What mattered most to me was that Katie appeared to have had a pleasant day overall, blissfully ignorant of any strain. From the photos and anecdotes David shared on social media, it appeared that Amelia and David were having a great time on their honeymoon after the wedding. He deserved to savor this unique moment with his new bride, therefore I was pleased for him. After they got back from their honeymoon, David asked Roger, our parents, and me to lunch at his new house. Since we hadn't actually spoken much since the wedding, I was excited to see him again at what was supposed to be a laid-back family get-together. My mom and I have reunited in a surprising way since the wedding. She had taken the time to fully apologize to me for her remarks about Katie and her encouragement to try for another child years prior. She was truly sorry, and even though I was still wary, I was glad that she had acknowledged the hurt her remarks had caused. When David saw Katie again during lunch, he was ecstatic. He enthusiastically produced a selection of presents he had brought back for her from their honeymoon as soon as we got to his house. He had obviously given each one much consideration, and when Katie opened them, her face glowed with delight. As usual, David was totally absorbed in her, asking her about her favorite aspect of the wedding and told her how much everyone had been praising her for her involvement. She was beaming from ear to ear. He often expressed his pride in her, telling her that friends and family had called him to tell him how well Katie had done after the wedding. Katie was so proud to hear all of these praises, and her eyes were sparkling with joy. But I couldn't help but observe Amelia as my brother showered Katie with love. I kept a tight eye on her, and it became clear to me that she was not feeling as excited as David. She didn't even recognize Katie, let alone smile. Rather, she appeared clearly irritated, as though David's conversation with Katie had somehow annoyed her. Her face was a mixture of frustration and anger, and she hardly spoke to anyone while David concentrated on Katie. She seemed to be eager for the moment to end so that he would stop focusing on my daughter. Naturally, David was totally unaware of his wife's behavior. As a family, we relaxed and chatted in the living room after lunch. Amelia approached me at that moment and subtly requested that we speak in private. I already knew what was about to happen, so I felt a knot form in my gut. Since the wedding day, I had been preparing for this discussion. I nodded in agreement, bracing myself for what I knew would be a challenging conversation. We sat down to chat after Amelia showed me to one of the bedrooms. She began by praising me for doing a fantastic job with Katie, meeting all of her requirements, and honoring my promise about how Katie would look at the wedding. I thanked her and nodded, explaining that it was her special day and I wanted to show her respect. After a moment, she said that although she valued my work, she had been bothered by something ever since the wedding. My heart fell. Amelia brought up the wedding pictures on her phone and browsed through the photographer's selection. I came across pictures of David, Amelia, Katie, myself, and the other family members all grinning and savoring the time spent together. Her tone became icy as she paused on a single image and gestured at it. She said, "Look at this," as she enlarged the picture. We were all grinning and looking content in one of the family pictures, with Katie in her wheelchair next to David. Katie gave me a disdainful look as Amelia's finger lingered over her. Her voice was piercing and poisonous as she asked, "Do you see how your stupid kid in a wheelchair is ruining the vibe of the entire picture?" I had trouble breathing for a while. I was stunned. How could she have spoken about my daughter in such a callous and nasty way? I was instantly filled with rage. It was intolerable that my darling daughter, who had done her best to join in the festivities, was now being held responsible for spoiling the mood. I retorted, reminding Amelia that she was aware from the beginning that Katie was in a wheelchair and that she had no right to talk about Katie in that manner. My daughter had no choice but to pose for pictures. How else could she have possibly participated? I responded. Despite my arguments, Amelia sneered and said, "That's not my problem," adding that seeing Katie's wheelchair in every photograph was an eyesore that had made it difficult for her to see the wedding photos. She went on to say that I ought to compensate her for allowing my daughter to ruin her wedding, as if that weren't enough. Her arrogance horrified me. I was so surprised that she would make such an absurd demand that I raised my voice and asked her what sort of compensation she was even referring to. Amelia hit me with her actual demand at that point. According to her, I would have to hire a photo editor to either remove Katie from the wedding shots or, at the absolute least, make her appear to be wheelchair-free. I let out an incredulous gasp. How could she possibly believe it was okay to remove my kid from the wedding pictures or change her identity for the sake of appearance? This was the tipping point. I was at my breaking point. "Are you serious?" I yelled, my voice full of incredulity. "You want me to pay someone to erase my daughter or pretend she isn't in a wheelchair? You're an a-hole, Amelia. I am proud of my daughter exactly the way she is, and I will not be paying for any kind of Photoshop. If you had such a problem with her being part of the wedding, then you should have never let her be the flower girl in the first place." Amelia countered by claiming that although she had done everything in her power to stop David from allowing Katie to be their flower girl, he could not agree because his love for her was so blind. She told me that she was aware that he would have called off the wedding if she had persisted on not inviting my daughter. When I discovered that this woman had been so bitter about Katie, I shook my head. I was shocked by the callousness and heartlessness of her logic. I sternly reprimanded her, telling her that my kid was a real person with feelings and didn't deserve to be hated in this manner. She had been truly thrilled to attend their wedding because she liked her uncle. Now that Amelia was my sister-in-law, she certainly didn't deserve to be treated this way. Amelia, however, seemed unconcerned. She countered by claiming that Katie and I were both attention seekers and that I should remember that Katie's disability was the sole reason people had taken such an interest in her during the wedding. Something inside of me exploded at the disgustingness of her comments. My long simmering anger suddenly erupted, and I slapped Amelia before I really realized what I was doing. The silence of the room reverberated with the sound of my palm touching her face. My hand was shaking as I stood there, and the weight of everything that had just transpired was heaving in my chest. Amelia's eyes widened incredulously, and her cheeks turned scarlet with horror. My brother, my husband, and my parents stormed into the room before she could react. Amelia was questioned by my brother about whether or not she meant what she had said about Katie. Amelia's eyes grew wide with insight. As it happens, David had been listening in on our entire talk and had probably heard all of her nasty and deceptive comments. Her face lit up with panic, and she made a desperate attempt to retract her statement, fumbling over her words. However, it was too late. David's voice filled the room as he screamed at her, accusing her of being arrogant and cunning for dragging me aside to discuss my daughter in such a manner. His voice was a mix of grief and rage as he said, "I can't believe you manipulated me into thinking you were a nice person when in reality you hate my family this much." He was clearly seeing Amelia for who she truly was, someone who had concealed her actual sentiments all along, and the displeasure in his tone was evident. Desperate to save face, Amelia attempted to counter the argument. As she spoke, her voice wavered. "I don't hate your family exactly. This is just about Katie," she added. Then, in an attempt to change the subject, she accused David of constantly giving preference to Katie over everyone else because he felt sorry for her due to her disability. She asserted that he should stop giving Katie so much attention and instead concentrate on their marriage because she was his wife and should receive more of his attention. Then, feeling embarrassed, Amelia started to gripe about how inviting Katie had caused some of her friends to subsequently make fun of her wedding photos. According to her, this is why she wanted to remove Katie from the pictures in Photoshop so she could always remember their lovely day free of such ugliness. David, fortunately, wasn't having it. He advised her to quit being so arrogant and to stop acting as though his niece might have ruined their photos. He claimed that her presence enhanced the beauty of the photos. "I love Katie like my own daughter," he stated. "Giving attention to her doesn't take away anything from you. The fact that I even have to explain this goes to show how cheap your mentality is. Katie is part of my family, and if you hate her this much, then I can't be married to you." When David's comments struck Amelia, her face became white. He gave her a clear look that made it clear he wasn't going to overlook this. "You're an ableist," he continued, repeating what I had said before. "The fact that you continue to justify your behavior means that you will never change. I do not want to be married to a cruel woman like you. Pack up your things and go back to your parents' place." Still in disbelief, Amelia attempted to protest again, but my mother, who had been silent until now, finally interrupted, clearly furious. She was upset at the circumstance, stating that although it was one thing to not enjoy the attention Katie got at the wedding, it was cruel to think of removing her from the photos. My mother informed Amelia that she should feel ashamed of herself for ever bringing up the subject, and she firmly expressed her support for David's choice. Amelia realized she had nothing left to stand on after hearing my mother's defense and witnessing David's uncompromising position. My husband appeared enraged, and I have no doubt that he would have physically assaulted Amelia for saying such awful things about our kid if she hadn't been my brother's wife at the time. Her actual nature had been exposed for everyone to see, and Amelia was outnumbered. She reluctantly left the house with only her phone and car keys because she had no other option. I was grateful that David stood up for Katie, but he later apologized to Roger and me for what his wife had said about our daughter. He has nothing to do with this. Probably after Amelia had gone to them in tears, Amelia's parents called David and my parents that evening to talk more about the matter. But David had asked for a break so he could calm himself and consider the situation. Amelia has been messaging me ever since the incident, essentially accusing me of causing friction between her and David. She believes that by agreeing to pay for a photo editor, I could have easily resolved their problems. Naturally, I don't want to be the reason my brother's marriage fails, but I also can't forgive what Amelia said to me about my kid. Update 1. I can't respond to everyone because I'm getting so many DMs and comments. I shall therefore make all the points clear here. Amelia was aware of Katie's friendship with my brother because she had previously met her. However, it appeared that she had been able to hide her contempt for my daughter for a long time. I had never had the slightest suspicion that she truly detested my kid to this extent. We try our best to make Katie feel as normal as possible so she doesn't feel like she is being treated differently because of her impairment, but I recognize that some people may find it awkward to see a child in a wheelchair, especially during a wedding. Regardless of the fact that Katie is in a wheelchair, I am sure that people would still find her attractive. She has her dad's blonde hair and blue eyes. Amelia was obviously merely attempting to point out my daughter's flaws out of jealousy. Katie's godfather is my brother. This is because I know that my husband will support my daughter no matter what happens to us. He is extremely protective of Katie since he loves her like his own daughter. It must have felt like a total betrayal to him to hear Amelia's statements and realize her actual intentions toward my daughter. Since Katie was absorbed in her cartoons, I doubt she heard anything Amelia and I said. She would have undoubtedly questioned me later if she had. Update 2. In case you were wondering, my brother is having his wedding revoked. My brother and his attorney are adamant that Katie lied to him from the beginning and tricked him into believing she would get along with his family when she wouldn't. Amelia panicked and tried desperately to keep her marriage intact when she realized that David was truly serious about leaving her. She made a pathetic attempt to apologize to me, but it was obvious to me that her words were not sincere. She wasn't prepared to accept responsibility for her actions or show true regret. Knowing that her apologies was merely a ruse to deflect criticism from herself, I was unable to accept it. Her rage was only increased by this. She became angry with me right away and accused me of destroying my brother's life. It seemed as though I was the cause of all her issues instead of the results of her own decisions. She accused me of being the one who made my brother leave her when he could have been content with her. As if that weren't enough, Amelia's parents also contacted my parents in an effort to place the responsibility for their daughter's struggles on Katie and me. Fortunately, my parents have denied this unjust claim. In particular, my dad expressed his disappointment, telling them that he is glad she will no longer be a part of our family and that they should be embarrassed of the daughter they raised. The fact that my family has supported Katie and me over this entire ordeal makes me really proud. I did apologize to my brother for what he was going through with Amelia when we spoke. He convinced me that knowing the truth about her now was preferable to later, when she may have said or done something more hurtful in front of Katie. I absolutely concur, and I'm relieved that we are also successfully removing Amelia from our lives. Update 3. My previous update was 4 months ago. For those who are curious, my brother is no longer married to Amelia after formally annulling their union. Everyone reacted negatively to Amelia after the truth about their failing marriage was made public. Eventually, she apologized to me, but I just blocked her without answering. We all had a vacation together not long ago. We had an amazing time together. I'm really happy that David and Katie still have such a wonderful connection. I'm thankful that the entire ordeal has only made our family ties stronger.